So when we collect inputs from a user, we are not just limited to getting one input at a time, like we saw in our previous example. I'm going to show you how to get an entire line of inputs. So first, we have to make sure we have our import statements, which we do have here. And then we have to enable our program to receive inputs. So I'm just going to add that statement here by clicking the input button and then statement. So now that that is done, we have to assign the received input to a variable. So we're going to create a variable. This is going to be a string variable. And we're going to call this variable sentence. So this variable is going to be equal to input dot next, and then we're going to add line here. So this should get the entire line of inputs. So previously we used inputs.next, and now we're using input.nextLine. Now let's display what the value of our sentence variable is. So we're just going to use our output statement, and then we're going to put the sentence variable in there. So before I run this code, let's make sure we have some inputs. And I'm going to use the same inputs as last time. You only live once. And I'm going to add another line here that reads, that is the model. Okay, so I'm now going to run our code. And as you can see, the output here is the first line of inputs that we had, the entire first line. And just like with our previous example, we can get the next line of input by stating input.nextLine again. So let's create another variable here, which is going to be a string variable called sentence2. And then we're going to get the next line of inputs. So instead of displaying the original first line of input or the sentence, we're going to display sentence2 here. So we're going to change this variable name to sentence2. And now let's run our code again. And here, as you can see, we're getting the second line of inputs. So far I've showed you how to collect some string or some text input from a user. But now suppose we want to collect a number from a user. Let me show you how to do that. So I'm just going to remove everything here. And the only difference here with the number is that instead of using the input.next or input.nextLine, we're going to use input dot next, and we're using int this time. So this would collect our input in an integer format. So let's assign this to a variable. We'll call this variable num, and num is going to be of type int. So let's print out the value of num. So keep in mind that if we are expecting an integer value, we have to make sure that the inputs that we provide are actually integers. So I'm just going to remove everything here. Now I'm going to provide some numbers. So let me go ahead and run our code. And as you can see now, the output is the first number we had. This would retrieve one integer at a time. And finally, I'm going to show you how to collect a double number. So since we already know how to collect an integer number, collecting a double number is fairly simple. So first, let's convert this to a double variable. And as you may have already guessed, instead of using nextInt, we're going to use nextDouble. So this should collect the number in a double format. And we're going to keep the same inputs that we have here, since these numbers can be translated as either an integer or a double. So let's run our code. And as you can see, we have retrieved the input as a double. So to summarize, we went over different types of inputs that we can collect. Okay. First, we looked at the string inputs, which are either the next or the nextLine. And then we looked at some numerical inputs, which are the nextInt or nextDouble. And depending on what type of input we're expecting from the user, we can use any of these to collect inputs.